So I want you to just imagine for a second that you are looking at a medical scan of a brain.
Okay.
And this specific brain is just completely devoid of the capacity for human empathy. Like you are literally staring at the neurological fingerprint of a serial killer.
Right. It's just a dark, cold scan.
Exactly. You see these dark, underactive voids on the screen, and they indicate a mind that is just entirely missing those fundamental brakes, the brakes that stop a normal person from, destroying the lives of everyone around them.
It's a chilling image for sure.
Yeah, but now imagine the cold dread of looking closer and realizing that the name typed at the very top of that medical file is yours.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is the ultimate collision of scientific detachment and personal horror.
Right.
And honestly, it perfectly encapsulates this profound, dangerous blind spot that human beings possess. We all just kind of walk through life with this quiet, deep-seated assumption that we are, simply too smart or too socially grounded to ever be truly manipulated.
Oh, 100% we think, I would definitely spot a predator.
Exactly. We have this locked-in confidence that we would see the monster coming from a mile away. And that very arrogance, that assumption, is precisely the open window that makes us so terribly vulnerable.
We really do assume we live in this safe little neighborhood of the human psyche.
Mm.
We tell ourselves, I know exactly what a bad person looks
Yes.
like. But today's deep dive is designed specifically for you, the listener, to explore this shadowy, deeply misunderstood world where seeing it coming is, well, it's almost impossible.
It really is.
We are taking a massive magnifying glass to the reality of psychopathy, and we're going to break down the highly specific, basically invisible machinery of extreme manipulation.
And we should probably be clear right out of the gate here.
Oh, definitely.
The mission today isn't to make you paranoid, right? Like, we aren't trying to make you look at your barista or your next door neighbor with intense suspicion.
Oh, please don't do that.
Right. The goal here is preparation. It is to arm you with an actual psychological defense toolkit. Because the mechanisms of manipulation we are going to dissect today, they are incredibly potent, but they rely almost entirely on the victim remaining totally blind to the machinery.
Yeah, the trick only works if you don't know how it's done.
Exactly. Understanding the gears and the levers of how these individuals operate, it literally strips away their power. Knowledge, in this specific context, is quite literally the only armor that actually works.
So when you hear the word psychopath, your brain immediately pulls up this very specific, terrifying Rolodex of names.
Ted Bundy.
Yeah, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Andre Chikatilo. We picture these infamous figures who committed just unspeakable, atrocious crimes.
We associate the clinical term strictly with physical violence and, cinematic serial killers.
Right, the guy in the ski mask holding a knife.
Yes. And to be clear, those individuals are definitively classified as psychopaths, but the vast majority of psychopaths are not serial killers.
Not even close, right?
Not even close. When psychologists use the term psychopathy in a clinical setting, they are not just describing a series of horrific actions that end up on the evening news.
Right, it's more foundational than that.
Exactly. They are describing a severe internal psychological defect. It's characterized by fundamental absence of empathy, highly antisocial behavioral patterns, and this ruthless, unyielding drive to fulfill personal desires at literally any cost to the people around them.
Any cost.
Yes. And the violence doesn't have to be physical. Very often, it is purely emotional or financial or social.
Which is wild because Hollywood has really trained us to look for a very specific type of monster.
Oh, completely.
We expect a brooding villain in all black, or maybe someone with a facial scar, or a visibly unstable character just, muttering to themselves on the subway.
We are essentially looking for a cartoon villain holding a giant cartoon bomb.
Exactly. But the real threat is completely camouflaged. It's not someone lurking in a dark alley. It's, okay, think about certain species of predatory insects, like take the microdon fly, for example.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. It survives by perfectly mimicking the chemical pheromones of an ant colony.
Yeah, it just marches right past the soldier guards.
Exactly. It lives in the nest, and it literally eats the larvae. And the ants never attack it because the predator smells exactly like family.
That analogy is chillingly accurate. Real psychopaths often dress just like you.
Yeah.
They talk like you. They adopt your slang. They mirror your career aspirations. And they just seamlessly adapt to your corporate culture or your social circle.
They are absolute masters of camouflage.
They really are. They understand intuitively that standing out as a threat is a terrible survival strategy. They want to stand out as a confidant, or a charming mentor,
Or a charismatic visionary.
or the perfect romantic partner.
But wait, if they blend in so seamlessly, and the clinical consensus is that only about 1% of the global population actually meets the strict criteria for psychopathy.
Right, the 1% rule.
Yeah. Why should the average person be worried? I mean, 1% sounds like a statistical anomaly. It sounds like a tiny drop in a massive bucket.
I get that. 1% of the global population might sound small on a spreadsheet, but in a world of over 8 billion people, you are looking at 80 million individuals.
80 million, wow.
That is the population of a major European country, entirely composed of people who completely lack a conscience.
That puts it in perspective.
And the raw number isn't even the most concerning part. It's the disparity between their numbers and their impact. Because they completely lack the internal brakes of empathy and guilt, their blast radius is disproportionately massive.
Okay, break down that concept of emotional brakes. How does that translate to their daily interactions with the rest of us?
Think about an average healthy person navigating life. When you get angry at a coworker, or you are tempted to cheat on a partner, or you consider lying to get a promotion, your brain activates a complex network of emotional brakes.
Right, you feel bad about it.
You feel guilt. You experience anticipatory anxiety about causing pain to someone you care about. You have a conscience that essentially acts as a friction mechanism against your worst impulses.
Okay.
A psychopath is driving a sports car with no friction and no brakes. So a single psychopath doesn't just affect one person.
They hit everyone.
Over the course of a lifetime, one individual can bankrupt an entire company, completely shatter a family structure, and destabilize a dozen social circles, all while calmly moving on to the next group without a single backward glance.
Or an ounce of remorse.
Exactly.
The blast radius. So one person can leave 50 shattered lives in their wake, which means that 1% statistic suddenly touches a huge portion of the population.
A massive portion.
And knowing that they're sitting in our boardrooms and attending our dinner parties and joining our book clubs, it raises a terrifying question.
Which is?
What is actually happening under the hood, like inside their heads?
Which brings us to one of the most wild medical anomalies in modern psychological history.
Yeah. The story of the neuroscientist who peered into the abyss of the psychopathic brain only to find a mirror staring back at him.
The James Fallon case.
Yes.
It is a staggering piece of scientific history. This was back in 2005, and it perfectly anchors everything we've just discussed about how invisible this condition is to the naked eye.
It really does.
So Fallon was a highly respected neuroscientist at the University of California, Irvine. He was conducting a massive project using PET scans to compare the brain activity of convicted murderers and serial killers with the brain activity of normal people.
Let's hover on the science for a second so we truly understand what Fallon was looking at.
Yeah.
A PET scan isn't just an X-ray of the skull, right? Like it's showing the brain in action.
Exactly. Positron emission tomography, or a PET scan, involves injecting a tiny amount of radioactive glucose into the bloodstream.
Okay.
And because active areas of the brain burn more glucose for energy, the scanner can literally map out in real time and in vivid color which parts of the brain are firing and which parts are dormant.
So Fallon was basically searching for a neurological signature of a killer.
He wanted to see if there was a physical, hardware-level difference between the brain of someone who could butcher another human being and the brain of an average citizen.
And to run a rigorous study, he obviously needed a control group of normal, healthy brains to compare against the killers.
Right.
So he pulls PD scans of his own family members, including his own brain, and the study is completely blinded.
He has no idea whose scan is whose.
Right. He's shuffling through dozens of scans, looking at these glowing maps of metabolism, not knowing whose brain belongs to whom.
He is analyzing this massive stack of data, and suddenly he finds one brain scan in his control pile that is catastrophically abnormal.
Like off the charts abnormal.
It perfectly matches the neurological profile of the most dangerous serial killers he was studying. The scan showed severe, alarming underactivity in the orbital cortex.
Which is where?
That's the part of the frontal lobe that sits just above the eyes. And it also showed underactivity in parts of the temporal lobe, including the amygdala.
Okay, so what happens when those specific areas of the brain go dark?
Well, the orbital cortex is essentially the command center for your personality and your moral reasoning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is the part of the brain that understands future consequences, regulates aggressive impulses, and allows you to feel empathy.
And the amygdala.
The amygdala is the emotional processor. It helps you recognize fear and distress in other people.
I see.
So if you have severe metabolic underactivity in those interconnected regions, you are literally missing the neurological hardware required to care about the suffering of others.
You are physically incapable of experiencing the emotional friction we talked about earlier.
Precisely.
So Fallon is looking at this scan, and he actually laughs it off. He assumes it's a clerical error.
All right, he thinks it's a joke.
He jokes with his lab technicians, saying, "You guys mixed up a serial killer scan with my family's control group." He looks at this dark, cold brain scan and says that whoever this belongs to suffers from the worst kind of psychopathic disorder.
He literally said they shouldn't even be allowed to walk around as a free man.
Yeah. But then the technicians double-check the records.
And they confirm there is no mistake.
The blindness of the study is lifted, the anonymized codes are broken.
And James Fallon, the respected, married, successful neuroscientist,
Realizes he is holding a scan of his own brain. The monster he was hunting in the data was him.
it's just incredible.
But hold on, though. This is where the logic seems to hit a brick wall for me.
How so?
Well, Fallon is a respected university scientist. He's a husband. He's a father. He's not a serial killer burying bodies in his basement.
Right.
If his brain scan screams monster, but his actual observed daily life is suburban academic, doesn't that completely invalidate the scan?
Right.
Doesn't that prove that the biological hardware doesn't actually dictate who we are?
That paradox is exactly what Fallon himself had to wrestle with, and it threw the entire neurological community for a loop. But it doesn't invalidate the scan.
It doesn't.
No. Instead, it illuminates a terrifying subcategory of this condition. We call it the prosocial psychopath.
Prosocial psychopathy. That sounds like a total contradiction in terms.
It does.
How does a predator become prosocial?
By using sheer intellect to bypass the broken emotional hardware.
Oh.
Fallon underwent extensive genetic and psychological testing after this discovery, and he realized that neurologically and psychologically, he possessed the exact same drives as the violent criminals he was studying.
So he still had the urges.
He had a massive drive for dominance, a deep desire to manipulate outcomes, a pathological need to win, and absolutely zero natural, innate empathy for other human beings.
Okay.
But unlike the criminals who ended up in prison, Fallon had a very high IQ, and he grew up in a supportive, non-abusive environment, so he consciously adapted his behavior to fit societal norms because he realized it was the most efficient way to get what he wanted.
He figured out the cheat codes to society.
Exactly.
He realized that playing by the rules yielded a better return on investment than breaking them.
Precisely. He learned that acting properly, being a respected colleague, presenting as a good family man, it kept him out of a jail cell and allowed him to ascend to positions of prestige and power in academia.
So he's basically faking it.
He operates purely on cognitive empathy, not emotional empathy.
What's the difference?
Cognitive empathy means he can intellectually understand that you are sad, and he knows what face he's supposed to make when you are sad, but he doesn't actually feel your sadness. He mimics the appropriate response because it's socially advantageous.
There's a detail from his self-analysis that is incredibly chilling.
Which one?
He was reflecting on his own nature, trying to understand how his brain dictated his choices. And he admitted that if he were presented with two options for an afternoon, like attending the funeral of a family member or going to a really fun party at a bar, he would choose the party every single time.
Without a second of hesitation or guilt.
Right, because a funeral offers him zero personal utility.
A funeral is an event entirely predicated on emotional support, communal grief, and putting aside your own immediate pleasure to comfort someone else.
And he just can't do that.
Since he lacks the biological capacity for genuine grief or empathy, a funeral is just a boring obligation to him. He goes through the motions of life only when it serves his interests. This perfectly encapsulates the prosocial psychopath.
They're playing a meticulously crafted character.
Exactly.
It's deeply unsettling because it proves they really do walk among us completely undetected. But, no camouflage is perfect.
That's true. Maintaining a completely fabricated persona takes immense cognitive energy.
Right. Eventually, under the right pressure, the mask has to slip. And Thomas Erikson, a behavioral expert, actually witnessed this mask slip in real time in a very public, jarring way.
Oh, the lecture hall incident.
Yes.
That is a phenomenal bridge from the sterile theory of brain scams to actual observable real-world behavior. It demonstrates what happens when the chameleon struggles to find the right color to match its environment.
Let's set the stage for the listener. Erikson is giving a university lecture, and for context, he is well known for his book, where he categorizes standard human personalities into 4 distinct colors.
Right. Red for dominant, blue for analytical, green for stable, and yellow for inspiring.
It's basically a framework for understanding normal human communication styles and baselines. So he's lecturing on this system, and he opens the floor for an audience Q&A.
And out of the crowd, a very strange man aggressively pushes his way to the front of the room.
Yeah, he isn't respecting the personal space of other attendees at all.
No. He has a starkly pale face, and he is staring intensely at Erikson, almost unblinking. And as he shoves past people, he is flashing these bizarre, inappropriate, clearly manufactured smiles to the audience members he is bumping into.
It was a highly discordant, socially jarring display.
He was trying to project friendliness while physically dominating the space.
Right, so the guy gets right up to the front, locks eyes with Erikson, and aggressively says, "I've read your work. I don't fit into your red, blue, green, or yellow categories. I don't match any of these profiles. So what category am I?"
He is aggressively demanding a label.
Yeah. And Erikson, sensing the hostility and feeling incredibly uncomfortable, gives a polite, generalized answer to diffuse the tension. But the man refuses to sit down.
He just stands there.
He refuses to leave the front, staring Erikson down with dead eyes for the remainder of the event.
It's a pure dominance play.
And the punchline of this encounter is that Erikson's curiosity got the better of him.
He did some quiet digging through his professional network.
Right, and he discovered that this colorless stranger had a significant criminal record for severe fraud and manipulation, and had been systematically fired from multiple high-level corporate jobs for incredibly toxic, controlling behavior.
The takeaway from this encounter is profound. Psychopaths don't have a default personality color.
They don't.
They don't have a core identity in the way a normal human being does. They are a void. They simply morph to fit whatever the immediate situation requires to manipulate their target.
So, if they need to be the life of the party to win over a wealthy investor, they project intense yellow energy.
Exactly. And if they need to intimidate a subordinate into breaking compliance rules, they project terrifying red energy.
They just switch it on and off.
The concept of a psychological anchor is vital here. A normal person has a baseline. You might be inherently disorganized or naturally disciplined or deeply introverted. You can adapt to different situations, but you always snap back to your core baseline.
Right, you're always you.
A psychopath has no baseline. Their internal world is just a mirror reflecting whatever persona will extract the maximum resources from you.
Okay, I have to jump in and play the skeptic here, though.
Go for it.
Just because some weird guy at a lecture acts intensely creepy and doesn't neatly fit into a pop psychology 4-color personality test,
Yeah.
that doesn't automatically mean he's a clinical psychopath. I mean, there are plenty of awkward, intense people out there. Making that leap based on a weird interaction feels dangerous and honestly unscientific.
That skepticism is entirely warranted. And the psychological community issues strong warnings against overdiagnosing people based on casual, uncomfortable observations.
Good.
Failing a communication style test does not equal a personality disorder. The anecdote simply illustrates the chameleon effect when it breaks down in public.
Gotcha.
In a clinical setting, professionals don't rely on pop psychology colors. They use rigorous, highly sophisticated psychometric assessments, such as the PPIR,
Which stands for?
the Psychopathic Personality Inventory Revised.
Okay, so how does a test like the PPAR actually work? If a psychopath is a master manipulator and a habitual liar, wouldn't they just lie on the test to make themselves look perfectly normal?
That is the genius of the PPIR and similar psychometric tools like the hair psychopathy checklist. They don't ask obvious questions like, do you enjoy manipulating people?
Right, that would be too easy.
They are designed to measure a specific cluster of dark traits through indirect questioning and by identifying contradictory response patterns. The tests include internal validity scales specifically designed to catch people who are faking good or faking bad.
Oh, that's clever. What specific dark traits is the test trying to isolate?
It measures factors like fearless dominance, which is an absolute absence of anticipatory anxiety. It measures cold-heartedness, which is a profound, chilling indifference to the suffering of others.
And what else?
And it measures self-centered impulsivity, which is the obsessive, calculated drive to exploit people and situations for immediate personal gain without any regard for long-term collateral damage.
So it's a constellation of traits where all psychological energy points inward to the self.
And outward solely as a weapon.
There is another massive trait evaluated in these profiles that we see all the time in everyday toxic behavior. And it's something people fall for constantly.
Pathological blame shifting.
Yes. The profound, almost allergic inability to take responsibility.
A core feature of psychopathy is that they view themselves as inherently flawless.
Right.
Therefore, any negative outcome must be someone else's fault. They will blame the economy, they will blame the incompetence of their colleagues, they will blame the victim for making them angry.
Look what you made me do.
Exactly. And very often, they will expertly weaponize their own childhood trauma as a get-out-of-jail-free card for their abuse.
Let's unpack the childhood trauma excuse because culturally we are very focused on this right now.
We are.
If a destructive CEO or an abusive partner or even a serial killer had a genuinely terrible abusive childhood, our societal instinct is to offer grace.
Right, we want to be empathetic.
We say, look what they went through. Of course they turned out this way. They're just acting out of pain.
And this raises an incredibly critical point about psychological accountability. It is absolutely true that someone like Jeffrey Dahmer had a profoundly disturbed, horrific upbringing. No serious psychologist denies the impact of severe early trauma. But there is a massive distinction to be made. A horrific childhood is an explanation for how a psychological profile developed. It is not an excuse for present-day cruelty.
Because if trauma automatically created monsters, the world would be entirely populated by monsters.
Millions of people survive unimaginably worse childhoods. They endure severe abuse, grinding poverty, and systemic neglect, and they process that pain.
And they don't hurt people.
They go on to become incredibly empathetic, successful, loving parents and community leaders. They use their trauma as an engine to build a better life and to fiercely protect others from experiencing what they went through. A psychopath doesn't process trauma, they weaponize it. They use their past as a convenient, bulletproof shield.
So when a psychopath says, you have to forgive my explosive rage because my father was abusive, what are they actually communicating?
What they are actually communicating is, I have found a socially acceptable loophole to force you to endure my abuse without consequence.
That is sickening. The trauma isn't a tragedy they're trying to heal from. It's just another tool in the belt.
Exactly.
And now that we understand the profile, how they hide, how they mimic, and how they deflect all accountability, we have to look at the actual weapons they deploy. We need to decode the playbook.
This is where the theory becomes terrifyingly practical. Understanding the underlying neuroscience is fascinating, but recognizing the real-time behavioral traps is what actually keeps you safe.
Right.
There are 4 specific, highly calculated manipulation tactics, the 4 pillars of control that these individuals use to dismantle the sanity and autonomy of their targets.
Let's break these down step by step.
Yeah.
Tactic number 1 is arbitrary positive reinforcement.
Yes.
What is the psychological mechanism behind this?
Arbitrary positive reinforcement is a cycle of intense, overwhelming reward followed by a sudden, inexplicable, devastating withdrawal. At the very beginning of an interaction, whether a psychopath is recruiting you as a business partner, hiring you as an employee, or seducing you romantically, they initiate what we call the love bombing phase.
Love bombing. We hear that a lot.
They shower the target with intense praise, undivided attention, lavish gifts, or unprecedented professional access. They study you to figure out your deepest insecurities, and they perfectly validate them.
They make you feel like you are the absolute center of their universe.
And that they are the only person who truly understands your brilliance.
Okay, let me offer an analogy for this, because it mirrors exactly how a predatory drug dealer operates on the street.
Go ahead.
A dealer knows that the brain's reward circuitry can be hijacked. So they often give a new user the first few hits of a highly addictive narcotic completely for free.
Right.
They want to flood the user's system with dopamine and create a severe chemical dependency. They manufacture the addiction. But once the victim's brain is chemically hooked, the free rides instantly stop. Suddenly, the user is starved, confused, and desperate to get back to that initial euphoric high.
That is a phenomenal, biologically accurate comparison. When the psychopath suddenly goes cold, when they stop returning your calls, when the boss stops praising your work and starts ignoring you in meetings, when the partner becomes distant and critical for absolutely no reason, your brain experiences a literal dopamine crash.
The sudden withdrawal of that intense affection creates a state of severe psychological panic.
You feel like you're in free fall.
So you start begging. Yes, what did I do wrong? How can I fix this? Just tell me what changed.
Exactly. You are craving that dopamine hit of approval. And here's the trap. The word arbitrary.
Arbitrary, meaning it has no real reason.
The withdrawal had nothing to do with anything you actually did. It was a calculated starvation tactic. The manipulator will only restore the love or the praise when you comply with a new specific demand.
They weaponize the return to baseline, like, I will only treat you with basic human dignity again if you hand over your savings, or if you work the weekend unpaid, or if you cut off your best friend.
They have effectively conditioned the victim to jump through increasingly degrading hoops just to receive the illusion of care. That dopamine starvation paves the way for the darker side of the coin, which is tactic 2.
Negative reinforcement.
Yes.
Negative reinforcement implies punishment. How does a psychopath deploy it differently than, say, normal conflict?
Negative reinforcement in this context is when the manipulator subjects the target to severe, sustained psychological bullying, physical intimidation, or emotional harassment.
Okay.
The crucial mechanism here is that they apply unbearable pressure, and they only relieve that pressure when the target completely submits to their will. The relief of the abuse is entirely contingent on your absolute obedience.
Let's clarify the threshold here, because we had to define abuse carefully to avoid that overdiagnosis trap we talked about.
Definitely.
Imagine a senior corporate director who deliberately refuses to approve the budget codes for your massive quarterly project.
Okay.
They ignore your emails, they nitpick every minor detail to stall the process, and they essentially hold your career hostage until you finally agree to falsify a minor compliance report they need pushed through.
Right.
Is that just tough corporate politics? Or is that psychopathic negative reinforcement?
That crosses the line into malicious negative reinforcement. The threshold for psychopathic abuse is this. If the behavior were fully documented and reported to an objective outside authority, like a regulatory board, HR, or the police, it would result in immediate, severe intervention.
So it's not just a bad mood.
We are not talking about a strict boss pushing you to meet a tough deadline or a partner who is grumpy because they haven't slept. We are talking about behavior designed to systematically degrade your humanity and force you to compromise your core ethics.
Wow.
A tough boss wants the project to succeed. A psychopathic boss wants to break your autonomy so they own you. The intent is total subjugation.
The intent is destruction and control, not development. That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's move to tactic 3, the drama triangle.
Yeah, yes.
This one sounds almost theatrical, but the psychology behind it is incredibly insidious.
It is highly theatrical. The drama triangle involves the manipulator creating a completely fictional set of rules or introducing a fabricated third party into the dynamic to control your behavior without ever seeming like they're directly giving you orders.
That's sneaky.
It exploits the human brain's innate social desire to comply with established norms and avoid conflict.
Give me an example of how that sounds in a real conversation. How do they plant that seed?
Imagine a new romantic partner who says to you very casually over a glass of wine, my last relationship was crazy, but the one thing I loved was that whenever I got really stressed and angry after work, my ex would immediately drop whatever they were doing, cancel their plans, and just quietly make me my favorite dinner. It's just how I'm used to being loved and respected.
Oh, wow. So they aren't explicitly saying, I order you to cancel your plans and cook for me when I throw a tantrum.
Right. If they gave you a direct order, your natural defenses would go up. You would rebel.
Yeah, I'd say make your own dinner.
Exactly. Instead, they are planting a psychological seed. They are creating a fictional standard of what true love looks like. They are subtly brainwashing the victim into adopting a submissive role through cognitive dissonance.
The victim thinks, well, I want to be a good partner. I want to show them I love them as much as their ex did. I guess this is just the established rule of how to handle them.
And the most brilliant, evil part of that is the plausible deniability.
Oh, because they didn't ask.
If the victim ever burns out and calls them out on the control, the manipulator can throw their hands up and say, what are you talking about? I never demanded you do that. You chose to do that on your own. You're crazy.
It gives them complete immunity from accountability. They are scripting your behavior by creating a fake precedent.
You put the handcuffs on yourself, and they just hold the key. Which brings us to the fourth and final pillar. And psychologists unanimously agree that this is the most dangerous, soul-destroying tactic of all.
Gaslighting.
Severe mind manipulation.
Gaslighting has become such a buzzword on the internet, but true clinical gaslighting is terrifying. The goal isn't just to win an argument or get you to do what they want. The ultimate goal is to systematically dismantle your grip on reality.
Yes.
They want to make you genuinely believe that your brain is broken and that you are literally losing your mind.
It is the deliberate destruction of an individual's epistemology, their ability to know what is true, and it always starts incredibly small, which is why it is so hard to detect.
Let's walk through a vivid example to show how this slow drip of poison works.
Okay.
Imagine a married couple. The manipulator, let's say the husband in this scenario, subtly tilts a painting on the hallway wall.
Right.
Or maybe he takes it down entirely and hides it in a closet. Later that evening, the wife walks by, stops, and says, "Hey, what happened to the painting? It's crooked," or "Where did the painting go?"
A normal person would just say, "Oh, I moved it." What does the gaslighter do?
He doesn't just deny moving it. He looks at her with total, unblinking, calm sincerity and says, "What are you talking about? It's exactly how it's always been. The painting has never been crooked."
It's chilling.
And if she pushes back and says, "No, I am looking right at it. It's different," he doesn't get angry. He acts concerned.
That's the key.
He lowers his voice and says, "Honey, the painting hasn't moved. Are you feeling okay? You've been seeming really forgetful and sleep-deprived lately. Honestly, I've been worried about your memory. Maybe you need to see a doctor."
It is the utter weaponization of false concern. He is using the language of love to plant the idea that her brain is failing her.
Or take another common example involving technology.
With that one.
The manipulator says, "I'm going out to the bar tonight with my friend Ahmad." The victim says, "Okay, have fun." The next day, the victim happens to see on social media that Ahmad has been out of the country on vacation all week.
Right. Caught in a lie.
But when the victim confronts the manipulator doesn't panic. They don't apologize for lying. They calmly insist, "I never said Ahmad. I said I was going out with Muhammad. I've said Muhammad all week. Why are you making things up?"
And they might even pull out their phone and show a fake, altered text message thread to prove it.
The psychological toll this takes over months and years is absolute devastation. If a lie like this happens once, your brain writes it off as a simple misunderstanding.
But when a psychopath subjects you to this reality-warping denial every single day, the victim's self-trust completely erodes. You stop trusting your own eyes. You stop trusting your own auditory memory.
Because if you literally cannot trust the physical evidence of your own eyes and ears,
Mm-hmm.
who do you have left to trust? You have to outsource your reality.
Exactly. You become entirely dependent on the psychopath to tell you what is real, what happened yesterday, and who you are.
You have surrendered your internal compass to the very person who is actively leading you off a cliff.
It induces a state of learned helplessness. It is the purest, most refined form of psychological control.
So we arrive at the most critical juncture of this entire deep
A
dive.
survival guide.
Yeah, if you are listening to this and you suddenly realize with cold clarity that you are in the blast radius of someone using this exact playbook,
The love bombing, the arbitrary starvation, the fake rules, the gaslighting.
the immediate screaming question is, how do you escape? How do you safely break contact with someone who holds that much psychological control over you?
And the clinical advice is incredibly stark and completely uncompromising.
It is devoid of any sugarcoating. The primary overarching directive from behavioral experts is simply this: run away.
Run away.
If you conclusively identify this cluster of traits and these specific predatory tactics in someone, you must remove yourself from their physical and emotional orbit entirely.
But reality is complicated. What if you can't just pack a bag and disappear?
Yeah, what if the manipulator is a senior partner at your law firm?
Oh,
Or a co-worker you share a cubicle wall with?
yeah.
Or a co-parent you are legally bound to interact with?
If immediate physical distance is utterly impossible, the secondary directive is absolute, impenetrable isolation. You must become a ghost in their presence.
Ghost.
You strip away all social pleasantries, do not share meals with them, do not ask them for advice on a project, do not offer them help if they are struggling, and most crucially, do not attempt to negotiate, compromise, or seek closure with them.
Why is negotiation off the table? From childhood, we are taught that communication, sitting down at a table and finding a compromise, is how matured adults solve interpersonal problems.
Because normal, mature conflict resolution relies entirely on a shared foundation of reality.
Right.
It requires both parties to have a functioning moral compass, a capacity for guilt, and a mutual desire for a fair, equitable outcome.
And a psychopath has none of that.
None. If you try to negotiate, you are simply handing them a map of your vulnerabilities. You are giving them data on what you care about, which they will immediately turn into a weapon.
So if I say, "It hurts me when you do this," they just hear, oh, this is how I can hurt you.
Exactly. If you try to explain your feelings, they will twist your words. They will preemptively go to HR or to your mutual friend group or to your family and spin an incredibly convincing, tearful narrative that you are the abusive, toxic one.
They will use your desire for compromise to orchestrate a smear campaign.
Hold on, though. I know people listening are feeling a deep sense of injustice right now.
Oh, for sure.
It feels fundamentally wrong to just run away and hide in silence. If someone is out there gaslighting people, destroying careers, and emotionally abusing partners, shouldn't we expose them?
Shouldn't we stand up, fight back, take them to court, or seek revenge so they can't hurt the next person?
It's a deeply natural, righteous human instinct to want justice, but psychologists warn against seeking revenge against a psychopath in the strongest possible terms. Trying to beat them at their own game is like intentionally stepping into a locked cage with an apex predator.
Because they don't play by the rules of society.
Because they do not feel guilt, they do not feel shame, and they do not feel fear. If you try to expose them or hurt them, they will not retreat and reflect on their actions.
They don't have that brake pedal.
Exactly. They will escalate the retaliation to a level of viciousness that a normal, empathetic person simply cannot mentally or emotionally sustain. You have a bottom line. There are things you won't do to another person.
They have no bottom line.
None. They are willing to completely destroy their own reputation, burn down their own company, and spend all their money if it means they can destroy yours entirely in the process. You cannot out-ruthless a machine that lacks a conscience.
So survival isn't about winning a battle. It's about refusing to step onto the battlefield.
Exactly.
And there is one fascinating, highly tactical piece of physical advice from the behavioral experts on how to handle verbal interactions if you are absolutely backed into a corner and forced to speak to them.
The vocal tone tactic.
Yeah, it has to do with the frequency of your voice.
Yes, this is a brilliant, counterintuitive psychological defense mechanism. When you are forced to interact with a highly manipulative individual, you need to consciously lower your vocal tone. And to be clear, this means lowering the pitch and resonance of your voice, not just whispering or lowering the volume.
Lowering the pitch. Why does that work? What does a high pitch signal to them?
When humans get anxious, defensive, or emotionally invested in an argument, our vocal cords tighten, and the pitch of our voice naturally rises.
Right, you get squeaky when you're stressed.
Exactly. Aggressive, high-pitched, or strange tones signal to the predator that you are agitated. It tells them that their manipulation is working, that you are emotionally bleeding, and therefore you are a fun, reactive target to play with.
So how do you counteract that?
By deliberately speaking in a low, flat, completely uninteresting monotone, you give them absolutely nothing to feed on.
It's like the gray rock method. You make yourself as profoundly boring and unappealing as a smooth gray rock on the side of the road.
That's a perfect way to put it.
They are poking you, looking for fireworks, and you are giving them wet cardboard.
Exactly. Psychopaths are notoriously prone to boredom. They need constant stimulation. If you provide zero emotional reactivity, no spikes in vocal pitch, and no defensive explanations, you become an incredibly boring target.
And what happens then?
They will eventually lose interest and wander off to find someone who provides a better dopamine hit, buying you the crucial time you need to plan your ultimate permanent escape.
Man, that is a heavy, intense, but incredibly empowering toolkit. Lower your pitch, cut the supply, and disappear.
It really is the only way.
But with that survival guide established, I want to pull back as we wrap up this deep dive and look at the broader societal picture. Because there is a major flaw in how we, as a culture, consume this kind of psychological information.
Yes, there is.
We have to address a passionate warning from the clinical community that we absolutely must pass on to you.
The overarching plea from experts in this field is this. Do not use the intense behavioral information in this deep dive to go out tomorrow and diagnose your friends, your family, or your boss.
Yes, you are not a licensed clinician. Just because your manager didn't shower you with praise for your spreadsheet today, or just because your ex was a jerk during the breakup, does not mean they are the next James Fallon.
We have to maintain a clear distinction between tough love, poor emotional regulation, and actual clinical psychopathy.
Right.
A strict parent who grounds a teenager for lying, or a demanding boss who ruthlessly critiques a flawed presentation might be annoying. They might even be genuinely unpleasant people. But usually their actions, however flawed the delivery, are aimed at a constructive goal.
They're pushing for better performance, or trying to achieve mutual team success, or enforcing boundaries.
Whereas a psychopath manipulates and destroys purely for their own dark, selfish gratification. For them, the destruction of your autonomy is the point, the cruelty is the point.
And we must be incredibly wary of the current trend on social media, where we take rare 1% clinical anomalies, like true psychopathy or malignant narcissism, and project them onto everyday human friction.
Slapping a severe clinical label on a partner just because you had a messy disagreement dilutes the meaning of the word.
It does.
More importantly, it actively disrespects and minimizes the horrific experiences of genuine survivors of true psychopathic abuse.
It's that blind spot we talked about at the very beginning creeping back in. We listened to one deep dive, we learned a few terms like gaslighting and love bombing, and suddenly we think we have this psychological X-ray vision to diagnose everyone who annoys us. We have to stay humble.
We absolutely do. Psychological knowledge is a shield meant to protect your sanity. It is not a sword to swing at everyone who inconveniences you.
I think that is the perfect place to land the plane. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, from the glowing, terrifying brain scans of self-diagnosed neuroscientists to the subtle, everyday reality bending that goes completely unnoticed in our homes and offices.
It's been a heavy one.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the shadows of human behavior. But before you take off your headphones, I want to leave you with one final, slightly uncomfortable thought to ponder, circling right back to where we started about our own blind spots.
Okay.
We've spent all this time dissecting the 1% of people who completely lack the capacity for empathy. We've studied their playbook, their camouflage, and their traps. But knowing how deeply susceptible the human mind is to these tactics, knowing how easily we comply with fake rules and crave arbitrary praise.
It raises a fascinating question.
It does. In what small, subtle, everyday ways are the other 99% of us, the normal, empathetic people, using these very same manipulation tricks on each other, just without ever realizing it?
It is an unsettling thought. Because while the predator might be rare, the human vulnerability to control is universal.
Keep your eyes open, check your blind spots, and we'll see you next time.